Hello friends, welcome to GMAT Point. I'm Prakhar Jain and today we'll be looking at the syllabus for the GMAT Focus Edition. Now the GMAT syllabus is actually not as daunting as many students believe it to be. It does not test advanced theoretical maths, elite grammar or niche subject expertise. Instead, all three sections, while from different subjects, test just one fundamental skill: interpreting given information to extrapolate answers to the required questions. And if you think about it, this is exactly the skill that is required to solve business problems. So in this video, we will understand the syllabus section by section, going over all the major and minor details. So let's get started. Now first, let's talk about quant. GMAT quant is primarily based on school level concepts, but the application is not that straightforward. The exam frequently places these concepts in business and real world scenarios. So let's go over these concepts one by one. The first one we'll be looking at is arithmetic. This includes topics such as number properties, fractions, decimals, percentages, and ratios. These concepts form the foundation of GMAT quant. A single question might ask you to understand a percentage change, express it as a ratio, and then use that relationship inside a question. Here's an example question. Now take a moment to go over the question. You can solve it in your practice if you want, but the point is for you to understand what they normally look like. So as you can see, GMAT arithmetic is all about understanding how numbers interact with each other. The second one is algebra. Algebra includes expressions, equalities, inequalities, functions, number patterns, along with some other concepts as well. It is basically about manipulating variables and numbers in the given information to get to the required information. Now here's another example question. Again, you can go over this in your practice, but the point is for you to understand what algebra questions look like. Now, one of GMAT's absolute favorite types of questions is word problems. They often combine arithmetic and algebra. You may need to create an equation from a sentence or compare possible solutions or find ranges and domains. The GMAT will rarely give you a lengthy problem, but it will always test if you can break a real world problem down to a mathematical expression. So oftentimes forming the correct expression actually holds a lot more importance than just solving it. Again, here's an example problem. If the revenue for a business increases by 20% in one year and decreases by 10% in the subsequent year, what is the ratio of the final revenue to the average revenue across the 3 years? As you can see, the concept of percentages, averages, and ratios was asked to solve a business related problem. It only makes sense that an exam for business program tests for this skill, right? Now, so far the concepts have revolved around interpreting information, but the GMAT also tests the skill of organizing information. This broad skill is covered by averages, sets, permutations, combinations, and probability. While these seem calculation heavy on the surface, the challenge actually comes from understand what is being counted, avoiding double counting, and considering all possible cases. So it is still heavier on the conceptual aspect as compared to the calculative aspect. For example, a problem might look something like this. A committee of 3 people is to be chosen at random from a group of 5 men and 4 women. What is the probability that the committee will contain exactly 2 men and 1 woman? Again, the central theme was the same: break a real world scenario down to its core and solve using mathematical concepts. So, overall, quant tests how you handle numerical relationships. Now, in the verbal section, the GMAT tests something different: understanding ideas and arguments. The verbal syllabus contains two types of questions. There is reading comprehension and critical reasoning. In reading comprehension, again, there are around 7 types of questions that are asked, which can broadly be categorized into 3 formats. The first one is about the main idea. Questions might ask you about identifying the idea of a passage, or about choosing the best summary from the given options, or about the structure of a passage. The second one is analysis and reasoning, identifying logical inferences from the passage, author's reasoning behind a statement, or quotations made to support an argument or deny it are all part of this category. The third one is author's perspective. The tone of the passage and the functions that the paragraph play fall under this bracket. What all of this means is that your focus should be on understanding the structure of the passage and the author's argument, almost as if you're analyzing a structured speech. Once the flow is clear, the questions become much easier to handle. Now, apart from RCs, there is another question type in verbal: critical reasoning. This tests your ability to evaluate arguments. These usually have a conclusion following from some evidence, and the task at hand is to understand the logic behind that argument. Again, these can be broadly categorized into 3 categories. The first and the largest category concerns the evaluation of the argument. Questions might ask you to identify statements that strengthen or weaken the argument. They may also ask you to identify the underlying assumption for that argument. The second category is logical inference. Similar to RCs, you are supposed to recognize what might logically follow from the argument. The third category is argument structure. So questions will be framed around identifying the roles of certain statements or fundamental flaws in the reasoning, or understanding the flow of the argument. Maybe the evidence is not trustworthy. maybe the conclusion overlooks an important factor. So you should focus on recognize the type of argument being presented and the relationship between the evidence and the conclusion. Regular practice across different CR categories helps you become familiar with the patterns tested in the GMAT. And now let's move on to perhaps the section that scares the most candidates, data insights. Now data insights can be thought of as the middle ground between quant and verbal since there are both math and non-math related questions. This is probably the most aligned to real business problems that professionals deal with. There are 5 different types of questions, but there are majorly 3 categories that are tested. The first one is data sufficiency. Here you are given a question along with 2 independent pieces of information. Now your job is not to calculate the answer. In fact, some of them are actually unanswerable. Your job is to determine whether the information is sufficient. So data sufficiency is testing whether you can determine if a certain set of information is sufficient or not. The second category involves interpreting data from graphs and tables. Tables test your capabilities in sorting, comparing, and filtering data, while graphs test your understanding of scales, trends, and relationships between variables across a wide variety of chart formats. In both the cases, the key is to identify and separate the required information from the irrelevant information. Now, this is where elite scorers are differentiated from good scorers. They have an unparalleled familiarity with charts. We have built a new tool specifically designed for refining this skill called the Visual Library. You can find the link for it in the description. Now, the third category is probably the one most students struggle to get questions correct in. It revolves around multiple sources of data and covers 2 types of questions. Multi-source reasoning gives you information that is divided into tabs and is usually in a different format for each tab. Your job is to filter out the necessary information and connect details from the different sources. On the other hand, two-part analysis tasks you with making 2 connected selections that satisfy the same conditions. In a way, they are similar to MSR, except the flow of information is reversed. The questions are less about difficult calculations and more about information management. Now, you can probably agree that the GMAT is actually pretty well designed for filtering out candidates that have the skills necessary to make effective data-driven decisions in business roles. Each section tests a skill that is essential for these roles. Now, in this video, we have covered the GMAT Focus Edition syllabus categorically, but it actually runs a lot deeper than this. For the detailed topic-wise syllabus, check out the link to our free PDF in the description. Use it as a checklist for your own preparation. The link to our GMAT Point course will also be in the description. And for more such GMAT related content, subscribe to GMAT Point.